Tecumseh demanded war, but Pushmataha, an orphaned Choctaw who would become an American general, chose alliance over annihilation. This gamble made him a U.S. hero, yet within years of his celebrated funeral, the government he trusted shattered every promise, forcing his people onto the Trail of Tears. Why did Pushmataha stake everything on diplomacy? And how did hope turn to betrayal? The answer unfolds in From U.S. General to Tragic Betrayal, the story of Pushmataha. The Choctaw Council gathered in the autumn heat. Hundreds of men pressed shoulder to shoulder beneath the trees near Hontubby's village. Tecumseh arrived with a retinue of 20 Shawnee warriors, their faces painted, their presence a silent challenge. The air was thick with anticipation. Shawnee dances set the rhythm, drums echoing through the woods. Tecumseh stood, his voice cutting through the crowd, condemning the endless loss of native land. He called the Americans a spreading fire, consuming everything in their path. Let the white race perish. They seize your land, corrupt your women. Back whence they came, upon a trail of blood, they must be driven. His words were urgent, promising unity and vengeance if the Choctaw would join his confederacy. Silence followed. Pushmataha rose, tall and composed, his gaze sweeping across the council. He spoke not with fury, but with measured force. We are a small people. The Americans are a very large people. We are in their midst. We cannot drive them out. We must live with them. He reminded the council that the Choctaw were farmers, not hunters. Their lives depended on peace. He questioned Tecumseh's authority. Who had appointed him to speak for all nations? Pushmataha's words carried the weight of hard experience. You advise us to unite and strike the Americans. This is a foolish plan. We will be destroyed, and our children will have no homes. My friends, hear my words. The Choctaw have never shed the blood of Americans in war. The debate stretched for hours, voices rising and falling. Some elders murmured in agreement with Tecumseh's warning, but the majority felt the gravity of Pushmataha's argument. When the vote came, the council sided with Pushmataha. The Choctaw would not join Tecumseh's war. That night, word spread quickly. Neutrality and alliance with the United States had carried the day. Pushmataha, Pushmataha. The name carries weight in Choctaw memory, each syllable a reminder of both strength and burden. In Choctaw tradition, names are more than labels. They are stories, sometimes prophecies, shaping how a leader is remembered. Contemporary Choctaw historians remind us that Pushmataha's rise was not written in bloodline or inheritance, but earned through action, voice, and vision. His full name, Pushmataha, translates to Messenger of Death, a title reflecting both his prowess as a warrior and his role as a messenger between worlds, between the old ways and the new, between hope and loss. Oral tradition holds that Pushmataha's words at the 1811 council were more than strategy. They were a line drawn for survival. Choctaw elders today recall how he spoke not just to the council, but to generations yet to come. The debate with Tecumseh is still told as a lesson in discernment, how to weigh pride against the future of a people. One historian explains, Pushmataha chose the harder path. He knew that to reject Tecumseh's call was not cowardice, but a decision to protect the Choctaw way of life, to keep families on their land as long as possible. Pronunciation matters. Pushmataha, a name spoken with care, echoing through classrooms and council meetings in present-day Oklahoma and Mississippi. For the Choctaw, remembering Pushmataha means remembering the moment their nation stood at a crossroads. The outcome was not just a vote, it was a promise to endure, however uncertain the road ahead. That promise, carried in the name Pushmataha, would soon be tested in war, diplomacy, and the relentless pressure of a growing United States. The legacy of that council and the leader who shaped it still shapes the Choctaw story today. In the wake of the council's decision, Pushmataha turned his attention to the looming threat posed by the Red Stick Creeks. The massacre at Fort Mims sent shockwaves through the southeast, and news reached Choctaw villages with stories of entire families slaughtered. Pushmataha gathered his war captains and called for volunteers. Over the weeks that followed, nearly 500 Choctaw warriors answered. Some were seasoned fighters from border skirmishes with the Osage and Caddo. Others were young men, drawn by duty and Pushmataha's reputation. They left behind farms, families, and their home fields, marching east into unfamiliar territory to fight alongside American forces. The Choctaw contingent brought more than numbers. Their scouts moved silently through dense pine forests, reading the land in ways foreign officers could not. At dawn, they slipped through river bottoms, mapping enemy trails and warning of ambushes. When American columns stalled in the mud, Choctaw warriors found dry crossings and safe camps. Their discipline set them apart. U.S. officers, often frustrated by militia desertions, noted that Pushmataha's men stood fast even under fire, refusing to break ranks or abandon wounded comrades. The Battle of Holy Ground on December 23, 1813, tested every skill they possessed. The Red Sticks had fortified Akanakaka with barricades and a spiritual confidence that no white man could breach their lines. Pushmataha's warriors flanked the defenses, setting brush alight and driving smoke through the camp. They closed in, fighting hand-to-hand along the barricades. The Red Sticks, trapped between the flames and the river, broke and scattered. American commanders credited Choctaw shock tactics for the rout. Survivors remembered Pushmataha's presence in the thick of battle, urging his men forward, refusing to allow panic or cruelty. After the fighting, he ordered his warriors to spare women and children, upholding the Choctaw code even in victory. In campaign after campaign, Choctaw fighters became the eyes and ears of the American army. They scouted the swamps around Mobile, intercepted Red Stick messengers, and guarded supply lines. Muster rolls from the winter of 1813 list Pushmataha's name beside nearly 500 warriors, a force whose loyalty and skill drew praise in every official report. Their actions on the battlefield did more than win battles. They gave the Choctaw a seat at the table in treaty talks to come, and lent Pushmataha an authority that even his rivals could not ignore. Recognition from the United States came with all the trappings of honor, at least on paper. Pushmataha's name appeared in War Department rolls, his rank listed among American officers, first as Lieutenant Colonel, then, by the end of the campaigns, as Brigadier General. No other native leader of his era could claim such a title from the U.S. Army. The commission itself, whether inked on parchment or delivered by handshake, was less important than what it represented. A public acknowledgement that, in the eyes of the federal government, Pushmataha had become indispensable. He was now a general, not just to his own people, but to the Americans as well. Andrew Jackson, never quick with praise, made an exception. In official reports, he called Pushmataha the greatest and bravest Indian I have ever known. Letters to Washington carried the same refrain. Jackson credited the Choctaw leader's discipline and battlefield skill for turning the tide at Holy Ground and stabilizing the southern frontier. Pushmataha's men, he wrote, stood firm under fire where others faltered. But the ink on military commissions dries quickly, and the boundaries of trust are never as clear as the lines on a map. Pushmataha's uniform and medal made him a celebrated figure in American circles, but his new status came with limits. The same government that awarded him rank continued to negotiate for more Choctaw land, and the promises of protection grew thinner with each passing month. Pushmataha understood the difference between personal acclaim and political leverage. The Americans admired their Choctaw general, but admiration did not guarantee respect for Choctaw sovereignty. Even as the last campaign ended, official correspondence shifted from battlefield commendations to treaty drafts. The next chapter would not be written in smoke and gunpowder, but in the careful language of negotiation. Pushmataha's commission, impressive as it was, became a bargaining chip, a symbol to be displayed in Washington parlors, a story for American newspapers, proof that the United States could honor an ally when it suited their interests. The real test would come not in uniform, but across the treaty table, where words would weigh more than medals or military rank. October 18, 1820. Pushmataha sat across from U.S. commissioners at Doak's stand, the treaty spread on the table between them. The American delegation, led by Andrew Jackson and Thomas Hines, pressed for a vast stretch of Choctaw homeland, prime farmland, forests, rivers, stretching west from the Yazoo and Homachito up to the mouth of the Arkansas. Pushmataha argued clause by clause, pushing back against survey lines that crept ever deeper into Choctaw territory. Surveyor notes from the day record his insistence on clear boundaries and protection from white squatters, but the pressure was relentless. The Americans wanted 5 million acres, nearly a third of what remained in Mississippi. The treaty's language promised new land west of the Mississippi, but Pushmataha knew those western tracts were already eyed by settlers. He signed, but not in silence. Witnesses remembered his warning. The Choctaw would abide by the line, but the United States must do the same. On paper, the cession was exact, 5 million acres lost in a single stroke. In reality, the true shape of what remained was uncertain, and the ink was barely dry before rumors of new encroachments began to spread. Before the ink on the treaty had dried, the shape of the Choctaw homeland was already changing. On a map of Mississippi, the boundaries before 1820 stretch wide, rivers, forests, and fertile fields running from the Mississippi River eastward. Then, a new line slices through the heart of the nation. 5 million acres, nearly a third of what the Choctaw still called home, vanish in a single stroke. The western edge, once anchored by the Mississippi and the mouth of the Arkansas, is pushed east. The Homachito and Yazoo rivers, once inside Choctaw lands, now form a border. What remains is a middle band of territory, about 10.5 million acres, but even these lines are more promise than protection. Surveyors' marks become reality on the ground. The land lost, 5 million acres, echoes in every new map, every boundary drawn by American hands. For the Choctaw, these shrinking borders are not just lines. They are vanished farms, abandoned villages, and the memory of ancestors left behind. Each acre surrendered brings new urgency. The Council's warnings about encroachment are now measured in miles and years, not just words. The next move will not be on a map, but in the halls of Washington. October 1824 brought Pushmataha to the heart of American power. He arrived in Washington as the head of a Choctaw delegation, determined to confront the nation's leaders over broken promises and the steady advance of settlers onto Choctaw land. In the capital, he was received as a foreign dignitary. President James Monroe shook his hand in the White House, and Secretary of War John C. Calhoun listened as Pushmataha argued for justice and boundaries that would hold. Newspapers described his bearing as regal, his oratory as unmatched even among senators. Charles Bird King, the celebrated portraitist, invited Pushmataha to his studio. The resulting painting, destined for the National Gallery, captured not just a face, but the presence of a man who had walked between worlds, warrior, diplomat, and now a symbol of native dignity in the halls of American power. The portrait's accession was noted in the Smithsonian's earliest records, a rare tribute for any native leader. Washington's winter was harsh and damp. Within weeks, Pushmataha fell ill with a severe throat infection. On December 24, 1824, he died in his lodging, far from Mississippi's woods and rivers. His final request echoed the life he had led. "When I am gone, let the big guns be fired over me." The city honored him with a funeral seldom seen for anyone outside its own generals. His coffin, draped in the American flag, moved through streets lined with soldiers and officials. Bands played funeral marches. At Congressional Cemetery, volleys of musket fire and the thunder of artillery saluted his grave. Members of Congress and the cabinet stood in silence. The burial register lists his name and rank, Brigadier General, among the nation's honored dead. For one day, the Capitol paused to remember a Choctaw chief who had become a legend in two nations. In 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, signed into law by Andrew Jackson. The act targeted the remaining 10.5 million acres of Choctaw homeland, land that treaties had promised would remain theirs forever. Within months, federal agents arrived with new maps and orders, demanding signatures on removal documents. Choctaw families faced impossible choices: leave behind the graves of ancestors, the fields their hands had shaped, or resist and risk violence, starvation, or forced marches. Letters from the period describe confusion and despair. Some chiefs tried to negotiate for better terms, but the government's position hardened. Soldiers and surveyors marked boundaries not with respect, but with iron stakes and threats of force. The first removal parties set out in late 1831. Elders, children, and entire villages walked westward, many dying along the way from disease and exposure. The old promise, that alliance and adaptation would secure a future, was broken. The land was lost, and with it, the physical heart of Choctaw memory. Yet the Choctaw story did not end on the trail. Oral tradition, carried in family stories and council gatherings, kept alive Pushmataha's example of discernment and endurance. Modern Choctaw voices reflect on this paradox: a people honored for loyalty, then uprooted by the very nation they served. Today, in Oklahoma and Mississippi, the Choctaw Nation preserves language, culture, and memory, drawing strength from ancestors who survived both the journey and the betrayal. The loss of 10.5 million acres remains, but so does the will to endure and define the future on Choctaw terms. In December 1824, Pushmataha received a full military funeral in Washington, D.C., a singular honor for a Native American leader, documented in contemporary newspapers and burial records. This documentary has shown how he led 500 Choctaw warriors in the Creek War, negotiated the cession of 5 million acres in the Treaty of Doak's Stand, and traveled to the nation's capital to defend his people's rights. Yet just 6 years after his death, the U.S. government passed the Indian Removal Act, resulting in the loss of 10.5 million more acres and the forced relocation of the Choctaw. Despite extensive documentation, the full extent of the council debates and private negotiations remains unclear. Today, Pushmataha's grave stands in Congressional Cemetery, while the Choctaw Nation endures as a sovereign people. His story is a documented reminder: even celebrated alliances can end in betrayal, and the record of those choices still shapes the relationship between Native nations and the United States.